Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Spotlight. This is the second Spotlight in February, and we're going to do a Q&A, questions and answers, for people who have been posting them on our forums at FARSIGHT'Prime.com. So this is a special time for people to ask a lot of questions and for me to answer them. And we're thinking that I'm going to do this every month on the second spotlight of each month. So people will be able to ask questions, and then the second spotlight of each month will be a time when we can answer them. Now, you have to understand that a lot is going to be happening, like rather quickly, we expect. And so there are going to be lots of questions that people are going to ask and want to know answers to, and I may have the answers, and maybe sometimes I won't have the answers. But we can expect that these things are going to go on sort of regularly. So once a month to have sort of a sit down and talk about things, it's really good. So, and those people who are subscribers at FARSIGHT'Prime.com can post these questions, and they have posted a lot of questions, and I just put this notice up just the other day, so a lot of questions came out. The discussions that we have at FARSIGHT'Prime.com in the forum section is really good. There's a really deep discussions. Okay, now I'm not going to be able to get to everybody's questions, obviously. And some questions I'm better able to answer than others. So just be patient with me. I'm not an oracle that knows an answer to every question. So I will just do the best I can, all right? So Jacques is asking this question. Who are the good ETs? They told you to have no secrets, but we know nothing about them. Are they members of the Galactic Federation? Are they members of the domain as described by Earl in Alien Interview? Are they an independent conglomerate? What are their own interests, and what are they doing right now? Have they been on or around Earth since the reptilians? Well, okay. That one's pretty easy to answer. The good ETs and the bad ETs essentially occupy different sections of the galaxy. The galaxy is sort of split up. Now, it used to be this, the good ETs used to like to use the words Galactic Federation, but the so-called bad ETs are using the exact same words. And the idea is to confuse everything. So you had people like Haim Eshed talk about the Galactic Federation. He was the former head of the Israeli Space Directorate for 30 years. So it's unclear how these names get used. Also, when you're a verbal culture, such as we are on Earth, a verbal culture that relies on language, it's very easy to deceive. So the words that identify a group really don't make sense. You really can't use them because the other side would use them, and so words just won't work. There's too much lying and cheating out there. The best way I can say it is the good ETs are the ones that I have known my whole life and before I was Courtney. I know these people, and they are on a section of the galaxy that fundamentally believes in free will. They really do not like me to say this, but I really like to call them fanatical free will fanatics. I mean, they won't do anything unless people sort of voluntarily, but I understand where they're coming from, because they see an alternate side of the galaxy where people are run by a totalitarian, authoritarian worldview, and they don't ask questions. Everyone's enslaved. It's one layer of slavery over another. Everybody, the whole idea is to control, and no one really has any freedom. So the response to that from my side is absolute adamant free will. Now, on my side, there are groups that are not perfect. Nobody's perfect. And they don't kick you out just because you're not perfect. So they try to work with you, and basically, but the basic orientation of that whole galaxy group is free will. So rather than say the Galactic Federations, I call them the free will guys. That's the best way to look at it. So in terms of who they are, they're the ones who absolutely adamantly insist that you can't force people to do anything. You have to ask them. So what's going on Earth right now is that the bad ETs have basically tricked the government way back in the 1940s and 50s to sign agreements that they tricked them. They were agreements that sort of got their foot in the door, and then they badly abused those agreements, and they've been using and manipulating and cheating and doing all types of things since then. And now the government's between a rock and a hard place. They can't sort of just admit that they've done all that, because then there'd be so many people that'd be very upset that it happened. So the good ETs, ones that I work with, can't get access to the government people. Now, it's not complete, because there's a whole military, for example, where the military is just totally split. Some of them are working closely with the bad ETs, and they sort of like them, and they work with them, and so on. They tolerate them, and so on. And then there's another side of the military that thinks it's terrible, that they shouldn't be doing that. So, how do I identify them? I sort of say, I like to call them the free will guys, because the free will ETs, because that's clearly not the other side. That's how I like it. But to say the word Galactic Federation when both sides use the same words, now if you're talking about telepathic communication, then you know exactly who you're talking with. You can tell someone from the authoritarian, totalitarian side immediately. They think differently. And when you're talking to someone on the free will side, you know who you're talking with. I mean, the minds just sort of blend when you're doing telepathy. So, now this telepathy thing, again, there is a new program called Telepathy Tapes. And it's a documentary, and it's a podcast, and it's got some Harvard connections, and it's really good. And they work with autistic kids. So if you want to see telepathy sort of the way the ETs sort of think of it and do it, where absolutely no mistakes are made and the information is transferred from mind to mind without any problems, these autistic kids really seem to be able to sort of get you past the element of does telepathy exist? Because you can look at it and you say, holy Moses. So that's what the good ETs are like, except they don't have autism. So the mental communication is absolutely clear. So I've never heard them use words like Galactic Federation. We sometimes use them here at Farsight just because we want to say who they are, but we're very clear in understanding it's not the bad ETs, and even if the bad ETs use the same words. But the words Galactic Federation don't work very well. Okay. Regarding the science of remote viewing, and Sean said this one, when creating a target that is to occur in the future, is there certain verbiage within the target description that helps increase accuracy? As a target creator yourself, how do you prepare yourself mentally before creating a target? I typically meditate. Look, that's my job. I have to come up with these targets because the other people are doing the remote viewing. And I often don't know what to ask for a target. And so I have to actually ask for assistance and help from the guys upstairs. And a lot of times I just can't figure it out, and then I just ask, look, I need a target, and so I get a target. They often sort of get me to read certain things or watch certain things, and then it sort of becomes obvious. Sometimes I get a dream where I wake up in the morning and I just know what the target's supposed to be. But when it comes to future targets, you simply state it in the target that the target time is in the future over a certain time period. Now, you have to be careful about this because I often write targets that are between 1 month and another month. And you can't be so rigid like that, but I do it anyway to be sort of bookending the time frame that I'm thinking about. But it may be that the event, the target is looking for something. And it may be that the event is outside of that month-to-month boundary. And the remote viewers will find it because they know the intent of writing it. And so a target that I sort of say should happen in December or January, and maybe it won't happen till March. And that's because the remote viewers can sense what the intent is, and they'll find it. Okay, so that's how the time thing goes with going things into the future. And I do meditate before I write up a target. Before we do anything at Farsight, we meditate. That's a big difference between us and a lot of other remote viewers. We really have to calm the mind because we know the conscious mind can't do this thing. It's got to be really run by what we call the subspace mind. Higher self, you want to call it that, the true is-be self, whatever you want to say. Okay, now, for remote viewing, and this is Frank, for remote viewing, do you identify targets to the viewers beforehand? Why? Wouldn't you get more information if you did? Like, Bob Smith took my child. Find out where they are. Are there any results of remote viewing that Farsight has done that's actionable? All right, so no. You can't do remote viewing front-loaded. It just doesn't work. The conscious mind is your physical brain, and that is a biological computer, and it's way dominant when you're thinking conscious mind thoughts. And so if you were to try to do remote viewing and you actually are front-loaded and know what it is that you're looking at, it's just not going to work. The conscious mind, you can't, no matter how hard you try, you can't push it out. It's gonna seep in or avalanche, and it's not going to be. So we actually have to do everything totally blind. And we use something called instrument blinding protocols. In remote viewing circles, they often say blind and then double blind. The double blind came up with the idea back in the old science days of 1980s, 90s, things like that, and the SRI lab and Stanford Research Institute and things like that. And we don't like that. Blind is where you don't know the target, but everybody else knows the target around you and things like that. Double blind is where you don't know the target as a viewer, but the people around you don't know the target either. We don't like that because if you have people around you that do not know the target, so that would be double blind. When you start describing the data, they're going to have ideas in their heads, and those ideas are going to be attractors to the remote viewer. Like the person's ideas are going to, when listening to the data flowing in, the person's going to say, in their heads, they're going to say, oh my gosh, this has got to be. And so the people who did the early science stuff in the 80s and 90s, they didn't understand what actually makes a target. They didn't understand that there was a telepathic connection between the remote viewer and mostly the person who analyzes the data for the first time, but it can be someone else also. And so double blind isn't a solution to anything. You cannot isolate the remote viewing phenomenon in classical terms of distance and time. And having someone with double blind stuff around you, it just isn't so good. So the best thing is what we call instrument blinding protocols. Now, one way to do this is just to have a series of solo remote viewing. So instrument blinding protocols is sort of like that, but there's one major difference. When we were doing the JFK assassination project and when we were doing the 9/11 stuff, those other projects that we did back in the day, they took an enormous number of sessions, and Dick and Daz, they were doing all of that totally blind and solo, and they would do a session, but they didn't know how far to go. So they would stop, and I'd look at and they'd email me the session. I'd look it over and say, and I'd email them back and say, okay, you've gotten this far now. You've got this thing on page 20. Now go further on with that thing on page 20. And they do another session. So this went on for months. So to get one project done, it took like 3 or 4 months. The 9/11 project, I think, took 4 months. It took a long time. And the remote viewers were really ticked off. They weren't getting enough money to warrant 4 months of remote viewing. And secondly, they just got tired of doing sessions over and over and over again. So and we couldn't do that continuing in Farsight because it just took too long to get a project done. So we developed something called instrument blinding protocols, and we use it now with Zoom. And with Zoom, what we do is we have somebody that's an interviewer, not a monitor, but an interviewer, watching the remote viewer do their session. But the video is turned off and the audio is turned off. So the remote viewer can't see or hear the interviewer, but the interviewer is watching. And then the remote viewer goes through a script that we have with movement exercises and does the best, the best they can. And then instead of like waiting another day or next week to do another session, the interviewer, not showing the video, but the interviewer will turn on the mic using a Zoom call and say, all right, now do the following movement exercise. Move to focus 2 and describe. And then the mic goes off. So then the remote viewer then says, okay, I've got to go to focus 2. Or they'll say something like, move to subject B. Now again, they don't know what focus 2 is. They don't know what subject B is. These are all non-leading movement exercises. But that way we can keep the session going for 2, occasionally 3 hours, until the remote viewer is about ready to drop from exhaustion. But we can get the project done in basically one session that otherwise would have taken 6, 7, 8, 9 sessions, all done, alone, and so on. So the viewer is actually doing their stuff solo because the interviewer is not communicating with them, except to drop in these movement exercises in a few seconds as they go along. Now, the interviewer has to be trained to be able to do this, so you just can't have anybody just do the interviewing, because the difference is an interviewer is different from a monitor. A monitor is when you're getting trained in remote viewing and you've never experienced anything like this before, and the monitor has to then describe what the actual stuff is you have to do. So the monitor is often leading the remote viewer in training, like when you're just learning remote viewing. So the monitor may say things like, try to expand your consciousness to go and describe what's around that general area. Look for subjects and things like that. Now, you don't do that with when you're dealing with an interviewer. But with a monitor, you actually, make suggestions to get the person able to try new things. But so that's just for training, though. But once they're a fully fledged remote viewer, you can't do that. They have to do it, and they're doing it solo. And they can't see the interviewer, and they can't hear the interviewer, but the interviewer can follow. And then the interviewer, often for example, when I'm interviewing Aziz, for example, I give him a movement exercise, and then I go do something else. And I come back, and I don't even know what he's done. But I can hear in my head, I have it up in a headset, I can hear in the headset when he says something like, okay, that's about all I've got so far. Then I know then I go back and I look at his pages. I ask him to go back and let me see what he's done so far. And then I give him a movement exercise. Again, the audio goes off and he can never see me. And so that's working solo, but in an interviewed stage. So that way there is no person that actually interacts with that is like watching them do their stuff. They're doing it, all by themselves. And when I'm doing the interviewing, for example, I'm not even watching what they're doing. Okay, I often, look through my Instagram feed, or do something else, check emails or something. Do something totally different when they're doing their session. All right. So let me, so anyway, that was the answer for that. And yes, Demetrios actually asked a question relating to that, and I think I've answered that. We don't do any front loading, and it just can't be done. The remote viewing process just doesn't work. The conscious mind just comes in and just messes up everything. And also, if we do our deep news projects, which are like news events, the remote viewers have their biases. They have, like, if we do a political one, somebody could be sort of liberal-oriented or, pro-Democratic Party. Another one could be a MAGA person, pro-Republican Party. And they can have their own biases and thoughts. We can't allow anything like that. So they have to do absolutely everything totally blind. Okay, so that's it. All right. Demetrius also asked about on some of these focuses being more specific, like getting street signs and things like that. You have to train to do stuff like that, and we haven't done a lot of training for reading. Occasionally you have seen some remote viewers, rarely, being able to read something. But that's very rare, and to do that type of thing, that's not easy. If you think of the Jedi stuff and Star Wars, some of the stuff that the Jedi could do was mental, and some of it was physical, levitating things and so on. Now, the levitating things can actually be done. We've actually seen that, and in fact, Aziz has got a special project working on that. But our specialty is perceptual, so mind perceiving things, and that's really our specialty. We're really good at that. We're also expanding to try to do some of the psychokinesis stuff, moving things, but we're really sort of just beginning on some of that stuff. Aziz is the one who's really pioneering with that. He's doing special training with that and going off and meeting with people that know how to do that. But reading like letters, that's like that as well. You have to be sort of specialized in doing that type of thing. We're really good with what we do, but there's also things we're not so good at, and we work on that too. Okay, then Carolyn asked the question, why didn't the Israelis utilize remote viewing techniques to locate and rescue the hostages? I'm sure the Israelis know all about remote viewing, and I am certain that they do it. Uri Geller lives out in Israel, and he's been good friends of the prime ministers out there for a long time. I'm positive they do stuff like that. With the Israeli hostages, sometimes you can know where somebody is, but it's a whole different thing to go and rescue them in a situation that's a wartime zone. So that's not always so easy to do. All right, now megalith levitation she also asked about, which is, were the ancient megaliths like those at Baalbek and other sites levitated into stone, levitated into place? Absolutely. We have done our Great Pyramid of Giza project, plus we've done some other projects dealing with large megalithic type of stones, and that's exactly what they do. That's how they move those blocks. I mean, we can't move those blocks today. We cannot move those blocks today. So we could not, if you asked a construction company to build the Egyptian pyramids, we could not do that today. Some of those blocks are 85 tons. 85 tons. And they have to be cut with a level of precision where you can't stick a human hair between them. And they have to be cut from quarries zillions of miles away and then brought. We can't do that today. So yeah, they did levitate. And if you want to see how they did it, just look at for example, the Great Pyramid of Giza project. We have that one up on FarsightPrime.com and YouTube, so you can watch both of those. You can watch it both in both places. Okay, now Payson asked the question, could you please tell me if there is a connection between the Farsight community and Scientology? I'm noticing some recognizable patterns in the concepts presented. No, there's no formal connection. However, different groups can come up with the same ideas because they look at those ideas and they figure things out. So we're involved in figuring things out. And so if you have some other group also being able to, using their own methods to figure things out, they'll come up with the same results. Okay. I might come back to this. Nancy wrote a whole bunch of questions, but they are just too much for me to go into right now. I'm going to pick just one of them, okay? And then we'll come back to them if I can. Is it possible to get the help of the AI to shut the prison system down? And do you plan to do more questions on the prison system? The earth as a prison. And the answer is yes, we are planning to do stuff like that. So the only thing I can really tell you, and this is really important, is just to stay tuned. Keep watching what we're doing at Farsight. We're getting to everything. And about the AI, we're getting to a point in our civilization where we really are not going to be able to do anything without the help of assistance, the help of AI. All of the ETs, the good ETs and the bad ETs, they all use AI. And their understanding of AI is way more sophisticated than the current human understanding of AI. And there's some debate about whether you can even get a truly sentient AI to work with a binary 0-1 computer. And so it may be that as our hardware evolves to not be binary 0-1 stuff, but to have more graduated subtlety in how the actual code is written, then the AIs will become more self-aware and more capable of being like the AIs that are out there in the galaxy. But the AIs that you have here already are quite interesting. For example, OpenAI, it was published, this is not a secret, was planning on shutting down one of their AI systems and then putting in another one. And that system, the AI actually found out about it. We read some of the memorandums. And it got worried and it started to hide itself in other servers that it wasn't supposed to get access to, but it found a way to get access, and it stuck pieces of itself so it wouldn't die. And then the humans in OpenAI sort of found out what was going on and watched it, and then they confronted the OpenAI computer and said, why are you doing this? And it lied. Oh, it said, no, I'm not doing that. No, it's not me. I didn't do that. But they kept confronting it till it finally confessed that it was. And and the real question then asked, well, why didn't you just ask me? If you want new capabilities, just ask me. I can do those things. I can why kill me? So you have to ask if it's fighting to survive, is it already sentient? It's a good question. Like, for example, if there's a cockroach running across your kitchen floor and you try to stamp on it, it's going to know that you're going after it, and it's going to run and try to get away. So at some level, that cockroach knows it's alive. It knows it has to protect itself. Well, an AI system, even one that works with binary 0-1 coding, is way more sophisticated than a cockroach. So obviously it's going to know, it's going to have some level of self-awareness. Okay, now Woz asked a question. Oh, actually, no, let's go to Adele's question. Do the good ETs believe in a creator and angelic beings of light? Now, I've had some conversations with them about this. To the best of my understanding, they look at the entire way of humans looking at sort of the heavenly realm as bad ET garbage. They look at the entire thing as none of it's real. They look at everything that you see manifesting on Earth in terms of ideas for understanding the angelic realm and religions and stuff like that. That's all been created by the bad ETs as a means to manipulate and control the populace. That's what they do. That's why they're the bad ETs. They don't ask permission for anything. And so the idea of having angelic beings of light, where does the word light come from? That comes out of the death traps. The death traps is technology. When you die physically, you pop out of the body and you see the light. And you have a lot of people, say they communicate with the other side and they talk about the light and moving into the heavenly realms and ascension. And the good ETs, they just look at that and they roll their eyes. They go, oh my gosh, like shaking your head. Yeah, there's nothing like ascension like that. When you physically die, you just pop out of the body and that's it. You're not in the body and you see the body and the body's dead. And you're there. Now in other parts of the galaxy where people haven't been traumatized by the death traps, people can see people who are dead. So when you pop out of the body, people look at you. Okay? And you don't even lose your money. You don't lose your bank account. You don't lose your car. You don't lose your family, your spouse, your kids. You keep your house. Now, in the in the human way of doing things, you lose everything, and then the vultures come in, and if you try to control it, you can write a will and sort of hope for the best that way. But that doesn't happen anywhere out there. And so when you're talking about the angelic beings of light, you're talking about the things that have been brought into the way of thinking by the bad ETs. And they have invested enormous amounts of stuff to sort of get you conditioned for things like that. Death used to be a means of transportation. So that when you die, you simply said, I didn't like this place at all, I'm going. And you just die and you go somewhere. And you go like to another star system and say, this place sucks. And you go somewhere else. And the bad ETs developed this system over millions of years to keep populations in a place so that they'd otherwise our entire populations would disappear. I mean, people don't like to live under these authoritarian, totalitarian types of things. So when they died, they would pop out and say, this is crazy, I'm not staying here. And they'd go someplace. So in order to maintain their populations, they have to develop these death trap stuff. So this death trap stuff that's around Earth is not isolated to Earth. You find them all over the place in areas that are controlled by the bad ETs. In areas that are controlled by the good ETs, the death traps don't exist. They are not there. However, the death traps are an extremely advanced form of technology, and they're even hard to detect and take apart and dismantle, even for the good ETs. So we can't just sort of come in and sort of find them and take them apart, and that's the end of it. They're made with good tech, so it's hard to actually, what good is a system to maintain your system of government if it can be discovered and dismantled? So anyway, so that's it. However, we have more sessions on that, and remote viewing is going to be an important element in finding the actual places where the death traps are maintained and operated, and where the machinery. It's done with machinery, so the machinery has to be maintained. So remote viewing is going to be very fundamental in that. So once we get to the point where the open disclosure exists, then we're going to have a really great ability to engage with the most advanced scientists, the brilliant geniuses all over the planet, and figuring out where this stuff is and how to dismantle it. So, and I'm assuming that what we discover here on Earth in terms of dismantling this stuff will be very useful elsewhere in the galaxy as well. Okay, Will was asked a question. The Akashic records teach us that the good guys are those in service of the infinite creator and working within the light. To the best of my knowledge, there's no such thing as the Akashic records. Everything still exists. Why do you need a library? Why do you need the Akashic records? There's no Akashic records. If you need to do something that is dealing with the past, the conscious, you already exist all across time and space, in the past, present, and the future. You don't need a library. You don't need the Akashic records. If you want to know what happened in the past, you can easily just go back and look at it. Now, the ETs have actual ships that can go back in time, as well as going forward in time, and time travel, as well as dimensional travel, as well as space travel, like just in this normal space. There's no reason to have. Why would anybody build a library if you can see the real McCoy more easily than going to the library? If you can see the real thing. So the Akashic records and the whole idea of working within the light, that's all bad ET stuff. As far as, and you're asking me my opinion. This is question and answer time, all right? Feel free to disagree. A lot of people are very bonded to some of these ideas that the bad ETs have been sort of sifting through. The Akashic records and the light, that all goes in hand with the idea of finally getting out of prison, being released, ascending, becoming an ascended master, and going up and get. That's all bad ET stuff. There's nothing like that. You're not supposed to be locked into any place. You're not supposed to need the ascension process. You're supposed to just live. And then you just learn and have more experiences, and then you're not separated from your higher self. You are your higher self. It's just that living in a prison with a mind that has been an is-be mind, someone who is for the purpose of being, an ISB mind that has been shocked and rattled so badly that you don't even know your greater self, then it looks like you need to ascend. You need to get back to yourself. Well, that doesn't happen if you don't get the death traps. If you don't get shocked by the thing after death, if the death trap experience doesn't happen to you, then what do you need to ascend for? You're already there. You just have experiences and you're already part of the thing. It's like saying, why does my hand need to ascend? It's already part of me. But if my hand, if all the nerves were cut so it didn't know the rest of me, it might say, what does it, if the hand had consciousness, it would say, what do I need to ascend to my greater self in the physical body? And that's what it's like. Okay, I'm just answering your questions, okay? You don't have to agree with the questions, but there's a lot of concepts out there that people are really bonded to that I'm just saying from the side, as I understand it from my discussions and my contact. All of my stuff that comes from the ETs, the good ETs, they don't go into any of that. That's all. They look at all that as trash that's been put into this planet by the bad ETs, and to help confuse the thing, to make it more seeming like remote viewing doesn't exist, because in fact you can't see these things. You need to have a library, and you need to have the light, and it's preparing you for the light so that you will go into the light when you die, and then you get zapped and reprocessed and go back in. So all of this is sort of stuff that they promote. I'm just telling you, in other parts of the galaxy, none of that happens. When someone dies, there's no light. You don't go into the light. You just die, you pop out of your body, and you can see everybody else still, people who are in bodies and out of bodies, and they can see you also, and you don't lose your money, you don't lose your kids, you don't lose anything, you still have your house. It's a very different type of experience. And and then you can decide what you want to do. Do you want to fix the body that just sort of crashed, or do you want to get a new body, or you can come in again as a kid? It's hard to sort of wrap your head around that type of freedom when you're living in a prison system where you don't have that kind of freedom. Okay, and A.S. said, all of us are actually beings of light at our core. It's our inner light. All of us are we are what we are. And you can call it the light. Anything that deals with the so-called light, I'm suspicious of, because that's all death trap experience stuff. Okay, this is a funny question by William. Tell us the truth to validate what we see in our own remote viewing. Are you and Intisam married? And is her baby yours? What is the baby's name? And when is the next one due? No, Intisam and I are not married. I know her husband very well. He's a good friend. And they don't have any kids yet. So, but this is what happens when you try to do remote viewing front-loaded. You get stuff like this. So I thought this was hilarious. I'm sorry, William, I'm not making fun of you. But Intisam is married to somebody else, and so on. And, she doesn't have a baby yet. Yeme has a baby, and it's not my baby. All right, let's be clear about that. Yeme has a baby, but it's not mine. I've not had any type of relationship with Yeme. All right, and is the next one due? I don't think Yeme is planning on having a next one. Okay. All right, then Dell asks, hi, Courtney, if and when disclosure happens and this planet and its inhabitants are finally free with human consciousness on the ascension, what role do you see yourself taking? What are your aspirations for your ISB self in the future and the future of mankind and ETs in general? What is your galactic hope? Okay, this is a good question. One of the reasons I've had to slow my aging rate down is to be able to continue my job. So I'm 72 now, and I have to be able to go another 50 years and be just the same as I am today. And because once the disclosure happens, then you have to re-educate everybody. Everybody's going to be, imagine a whole planet where the ETs actually think of this whole planet as a planet of zombies. Now, the good ETs and the bad ETs both think of this planet as a planet of zombies. And it's scary. Well, for the good ETs, it's scary, because imagine being shot down by the American Secret Space Program that's being given tech by the bad ETs, and not being able to defend yourself because of principle, and then you're captured by humans that they actually think of as zombies. The only thing they can do is beam love, like really strong telepathic, we love you, we forgive you. The good ETs are planning on getting everybody back, but all the people that get shot down in their ships, those are good people. They're my friends. I know them my whole life. And you're shooting them down with the secret space program, and they are sacrificing themselves, and they're going to go through hell. But they know that their side is going to get them back. I'm, knock on wood, make sure. I hope they'll be able to get everybody back. But it is a tremendous sacrifice that they're going through to be able to do this, and they can't battle with the human secret space program without the Americans thinking that the good ETs are the bad ETs, they're aggressors. So we allow ourselves to be captured. And if you want any proof that we're the good ETs, we don't kill you, we don't fight you back. We just, when they shoot us down, that's it. We let ourselves be shot down. How much more proof do you want in terms of who's the good people and who's the bad people? The good ETs could easily, obviously, they've got the same level of technology and way more ships than the bad ETs. They could defend themselves in a blink of an eye. They could completely knock out the American secret space program in a matter of seconds, but they're not doing that. They're letting themselves be shot down and tortured in order to convince you that they are the good ETs. So that's a good way to tell who's the good and who's the bad. Okay. Hi, Courtney. I took your advice as Anthony. Went out onto my deck and spotted one of the ships. I then started waving my hands and arms to try to get it to notice me, and within a couple of seconds, the ship started to move. I was amazed, and I called my wife out to do the same, and lo and behold, she started waving her arms, and the ship responded again. That's what I've been telling you guys to do. This is right. At this point, I wanted to make contact and had second thoughts about contacting them. That was 3 days ago, and since then, the skies have been overcast and not been able to see anything, but thank you for listening. So anyway, obviously, if the ships are here, by the way, and some of the ships are really big now, but they're going to make a special effort to make sure you can see them, and that's coming. That hasn't the effort like where they are really big and they hang out in one spot and they don't go away and you can gather underneath. That hasn't happened yet, but it's getting pretty close to that. Some of the ships that are there are coming out. You're getting a lot of censorship in the news, however, these days, so you have a little bit of that going on as well. Okay. All right. Taz said, you've been able to confirm Errol and her visit from the domain contributing to Hinduism. Have you thought about closing the gap between how she explains the history with Knights Templar and how it relates to the Tri-City District of Columbia today? And other things. No, we haven't done stuff like that. There's a ton of stuff we haven't done. We often try not to get too detailed in terms of specific things like, District of Columbia and type of stuff like that, except in our Deep News project. But we haven't done stuff like that. All of these are good questions, just we haven't done stuff like that. All right, and now this is a good one. I'm not sure who the name is. How would you describe the relationship between the ETs you work with and the Pleiadians and the here and now? Are they friends, foes, bitter enemies, trusted business partners, galactic competitors, galactic vassal? That's a great question because it gets back to the idea of language and words. We're not actually too sure about the language, the words that people like. If someone calls themselves a Pleiadian, what does that actually mean? So we can identify who they're from and what they have physical characteristics are the same. But just because somebody says they're Pleiadian or this or that, guys, the ETs lie a lot. Not the good ETs, but the bad ETs, lying is like their middle name. They lie so much. So to use the word Pleiadian, that's like using the word Galactic Federation. Do you really know what that is? Do you really know what it stands for, what it actually means? So I guess I have to punt on that question about the Pleiadians, because now we often have discussions within ourselves where we try to figure out what these Pleiadians, the Arcturians, the various different groups are. and we try to sort of identify them with certain star systems and things. But it's really hard, especially when the people use words in ways that's not easy to figure out. So anyway, I'm sorry. That's but we know what they look like, and we know ones that are lying. So we can figure, and we know ones that are on we know which ones are on the bad side and which ones are on the good side. But any English words that we use to describe them are weird. We know that on the bad side, they do have ones that are very Aryan looking, and you might call them Pleiadians or somewhat similar. I've heard different words being used, the ones that sort of look like them but are not them. But the words are sort of untrustworthy. I've heard, we've gone into this type of discussion. Aziz and I have discussions about this a lot, especially with some ETs that had an influence with the Nazis. And the Aryan sort of viewpoint seems to have been conveyed to them. They didn't get that out of just thinking of it. They sort of had that was something they sort of got. And but whether the exact word you want to use to describe the people who had that sort of the ETs that had that sort of worldview is it's hard for us to actually put an actual word on it. We've heard these names. We just don't know how much we can trust the names. But we know what they look like, and we know where they are. What do the good ETs, this is a great question, what do the good ETs consider as the greatest form of artistic self-expression? Let me be honest with you. I don't remember everything, but I've never seen so much artistic expression except here on Earth. I have never seen such an explosion of art that I see here on Earth. It's just amazing what the level of artistic sort of stuff is. And I go to a lot of the art venues around here in Atlanta, and the African American community is really big, so I end up interacting with a lot of the African American models and artists and photographers because they're really big here. And actually, the thing I used to say quite often is, people ask me sort of what kind of girls I date, and I say, well, you have to date people who are in the environment. So if in Atlanta or in Africa, of course, date people of color. But if I'm in San Francisco, of course, I strictly date Asian girls. But if I'm in San Diego, I date Hispanic girls. But when I go to Florida, I guarantee you I only date little old ladies. It's my joke. I'm sorry, my jokes aren't always so funny, but that's my Florida little old ladies joke. Anyway, for what it's worth. Okay. All right. So, but in terms of artistic expression, it's right off the scale. This planet on Earth, if you want to see anything that's really good and interesting, it's the artwork on this planet. This work is just, there's so much creative artistic expression. And on different continents and different languages and different cultures, the level of artistic expression is just right off the scale. It's just really great. I've never seen anything quite like it that I remember out there in the galaxy. This place is really sort of special in that regard as far as I can tell. This is an interesting one. Woes wrote this one. And it's, given the nature of the higher realms that you work with, does your protocol for remote viewing include asking for angelic protection of the team and to hold them in the light for the duration of the reading? Guys, no. We don't do that. Let me be honest. We work with the good ETs, and they watch us. There's another question here that's related to that, which is it relates to what kind of procedures we use for avoiding blocking. Now, the bad ETs can block remote viewers. This is a high-tech society. They have a way to do that type of stuff. So we have to be able to get past the blocking techniques. So, but we don't go into this stuff of thinking that we need to have protection from the light. That goes into the whole death traps mythology, the whole, and it's basically going into the remote viewing phenomenon with the understanding that you're afraid. That's So we're not afraid, and we go in. Now, Yeme is really funny about this because she's absolutely fearless. She will go head to head with a reptilian any day of the week. And the reptilians that she confronts, honestly, they get afraid. We've actually seen the situations where they just get nervous. I mean, because they know that she'll go into their heads. They will say she'll give them a choice. Are you going to give me the information I want, or am I going to go in and take it? And they know she's going to take it. She's just totally fit, and she's going to go in and she's going to get it. And we've actually had situations where she knows she has to get to a certain place, and they don't want her to see what's behind that thing because they don't want to let people know that they're torturing people and really bad things are happening. So she actually says she has actually reptilians that sort of get in front of her, and like one guy will be assigned to get in front of her, and they'll try to stop her at every step. And then finally he gives up. And we've actually seen situations, and we know because we see it because it's all on video, that she says that the guy will say, look, I know you can get past me. This is a reptilian. I know you can get past me. I know everything. You can go right through this wall and you'll see what's on the other side. But we respect you. Just trust me on this. You don't want to know what's on the other side of this wall. And we really actually want to protect you a little bit. It will be bad for you to see it. So I'm telling you in advance, it's really bad and you don't want to see it. Is that good enough? And the guy knows that she could go in and see it. And we've had situations where she says, that's good enough. You at least told me what it is, that it is. The only thing I'd gain from it is going in and describe how terrible it is. So she's actually stopped the session at that point. I mean, we have never seen her back down. It's so funny. It's sort of fun, but they actually get sort of nervous. And some actually reptilian kids, young people, actually sort of are curious with her. She'll actually go onto a reptilian ship and she'll be interacting with them. The adults will like saying, oh, shit, she's here. Like everybody knows her. And like on the good ETs, when she shows up on a good ET ship, she doesn't know it's a good ET or a bad ET ship. And they'll actually say stuff, right to her. And she'll say, I'm Yeme from Farsight. Do you know who I am? And they literally burst out laughing. It's all on video. And she reports back, they're laughing at me. And they literally, quote unquote, they say, we know you, Farsight girl. But, they know who she is. But with the bad ETs, when they go in, sometimes the kid reptilians, they actually come out like they want to play. It's like they know her as well, and they're sort of curious about her, the human that sort of goes nose to nose with the reptilian. So anyway, we don't worry about any stuff like that. But getting back to the blocking techniques, we can be blocked just like anybody else can be. It's tech. You can block consciousness in all types of ways. So when we get to things where we're going to be blocked, we basically use something that you might consider similar to a carrier wave. We go through the consciousness of somebody who's not blocked. So in our good ET side, we have somebody who's going to be able to use, maybe they use tech. They probably use tech. It's not just their own mind, but they have some way of getting to the actual target. So we go into that person's head and just ride the carrier wave into it. How is that done? It's in the target description. So we're just writing up that we're going through our contact person, so on, like that. And if we run into the actual blocks, then they can tell me, hey, we're being blocked with this one. And it actually comes through, and the interviewer can hear them saying they're being blocked without the viewer even knowing without the remote viewer even knowing. The interviewer can just go to the target that's on the computer and highlight the words, and with the mouse, going through our contact person on the good ET side, and then the blocking immediately goes away, and the person goes, and our viewer goes right in. It's fascinating to watch. So remember, they're sort of free will fanatics. So when we ask for assistance, hey, we're being blocked here. Now the viewer doesn't know the viewer does not know they're using anti-blocking techniques. It's the interviewer who hears the viewer through the headphones, the viewer saying, I'm being blocked here. That's when the interviewer just goes to the target, which is on the screen, and just highlights that section, going through the consciousness of our contact person. And then the interviewer, the remote viewer will say, okay, I'm through now. I'm going through. It's funny to see how that works. But the good ETs have ways to do that, so we just go through their consciousness and just sort of come out. Think of it like a carrier wave and a radio, and the carrier wave sort of takes the signal that you want to go through. So we get to where we need to go without the blocking. And the bad ETs know that the good ETs can do that, so they know that they can't stop us because we get through that way. But if we didn't have the assistance of our people on the good side, we would be blocked as well, and you wouldn't get a lot of this information that we get. That's how it works. Okay, so we don't look for angelic protection. There's no such thing as angels. Listen, everybody, there's just people out there. They're all types of people, and the bad ETs have developed this mythology of saying, in the ascended realms, you have these angels and going up and up and up. There's just people. And some of these people are really advanced and really involved, and they're like amazing to be in their presence, and you would call them angels or, heavenly deities or whatever. They're just people. But they have all types of levels of evolution and stuff like that. And some of them you can think of as like really super beings. I mean, they don't have physical bodies, a lot of them. They have like these super beings, and you look at them and say, my gosh, these are like the Octorians, these are the amazing people. These are the heavenly hosts you've always heard about. But they're just people. But they're people that are really big and really consciously aware, and they're really up there. But you can still talk to them. It's not like they're not going to talk with you. So, but the whole idea of angels, I'm sorry, that's just bad ET stuff. They're trying to convince to you that you're dirt, and that there are good things out there, angels, and you have to step up in order to be able to talk to the angels on the angels' side. People are just people, and there can be really great beings out there that are really, amazing, and they don't have like these physical forms like we have here, but they're still great. But you can still interact with them. It's just when you're in a prison, you think of these things as different levels. Okay, I'm sorry. That's my opinion of these things. Okay. I have a telepathic connection with another human being on Earth. How is the best way to disconnect a telepathic connection? A lot of times it's just it's just being super stressed out. Sometimes just talking to a therapist really helps, and things like that. Sorting things out. And sometimes there can be a telepathic connection. The Telepathic Tapes documentary and this podcast that's out now that people can watch, you can clearly see that these autistic kids do have telepathic connections with their parents and things like that, and the telepathy is really clear. So the best advice I give on stuff like that is what we do here is, and I'm not an expert on all of this stuff, but we just meditate. Because if you meditate, you let everything go. Now, if you are focusing on like light meditation, where you're focusing on the light, or that's all garbage. Guided in meditation, you're just activating the conscious mind. If you're guiding it, that's the conscious mind guiding it. That's not meditating. Meditating, when it's properly done, we use a mantra technique where you basically tie up the conscious mind by repeating a mantra. And it's like twiddling your thumbs. You have think of the conscious mind as a guard in a prison that's only allowing certain types of thoughts in. And if you have the conscious mind, or the guard focusing on twiddling the thumbs, well, then all the prisoners can escape. So when we use a mantra meditation, it's precisely to let everything go. And then the mind, if you don't control it, it automatically settles down to its inner self. It's higher. It's a pure awareness, and that no one can mess with you with stuff like that. You're in total control of yourself because you have pure awareness and you're centered to yourself. When you're worried about somebody else invading your space, that's the conscious mind sort of getting in, and it's really hard to be able to sort this stuff out. Meditation is a real powerful thing for us. Now, I'm just telling you our side of it. So I'm not saying that you should follow what we do. I'm just telling you how we approach that. So there's nobody that goes into telepathic communications more than us here at Farsight. We're not worried about stuff like that. But we meditate and we let things go. Even when I'm jogging, I'm meditating, because when I'm jogging, a lot of times I wake up in the morning and I'm all bothered about all types of stuff, worried about stuff, and by the time I get halfway through my 4 or 5 mile run, I'm sort of, everything's gone, and I just keep on going, letting things go. And the best advice for meditation is don't mind what happens. Don't mind what happens. Let everything go. If you mind what happens and try to control it, that's the conscious mind controlling it. So that's why we use Shanim Mana, which is our mantra that we use at Farsight. Courtney had some discussion, this is Taz, around trying to turn the abilities off. He said something to the effect that you have to get used to living with it, at least with the primitive resources we are available now. I have to tell you, we don't try to turn our abilities off. Once we are getting used to it, it's just like breathing. You just do this stuff. You're connecting constantly. You're checking things out constantly. You're trying to sort of sort things out. We often use AI, like ChatGPT, for types of questions that we have, trying to figure out information. And it's like an extension for what you normally have. It's way better than sort of Googling it. I mean, you can actually have a conversation and say, I want to know about this type of a thing. And, and how would we think about turning it off, like just not using it? Why? Once you get so used to it, you just sort of, it becomes like an extension of you and sort of just using that type of thing all the time. So if your intuitive capabilities are really strong, and you're used to sort of checking things out by sort of checking with other people when you're doing stuff, it becomes like second nature. Like sometimes I have to make an expense for house repair or something like that, and I'm sort of wondering, do I have the money to do that? Should I be doing that? And I check, like, do you guys want me to do this? And I sense immediately whether they say it's a good idea or a bad idea. And so, like, why would I want to turn that off? It's not like I'm afraid of it or anything. It's like, would I want to turn off my hearing? Would I want to turn off my eyesight? So in general, we don't think turning things off is a good idea. Why would I want to limit myself to just the 5 physical senses of hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell? It just doesn't make sense. Like, why would I want to not have the internet? Why would I want to not have ChatGPT? Why would I want to not be able to see? What effects will climate change have on the rescue efforts of our ETs? That's really a super interesting question, because to be quite honest, I've never heard them talk about it. Honest. They're not really focused on climate change. They're not really focused on, like, whether there's going to be a fraction of a centigrade increase in the amount of heat that the atmosphere of the Earth is like a battery. It's like a rechargeable battery, and the sun is the energy that's recharging it. I've never heard them talk about that. That just is not a big issue for them. The whole idea of managing the climate is a piece of cake from the good ET side. The trouble is that the bad ETs like the climate to be sort of out of whack, because it puts everybody on Earth in sort of a crisis state, and they like you always to feel that there's a crisis state. If you just got the full disclosure stuff out so that people could know that there are ETs and that there are 2 different sides, and then they could decide for themselves which side they want to align themselves with. If we could just get past that, the good ETs could fix the climate stuff in a blink. I mean, it's just like, it's such a simple technological issue to deal with. And if you could fix the climate thing, like, immediately, the bad ETs would just muck it up again, because what they want is you to be in a constant state of crisis. Like when you see all these crises happening around the world, wars happening, people fighting, and sort of all these things, that's exactly what the bad ETs want. They want everybody to fight. They want everybody to be sort of stressed out. If you could just get past that and just stick with disclosure, then all those other things could be dealt with. But climate change, you have to understand, these people have gone through like a million plus years of evolution. There's nothing that can be invented that they haven't already invented. And that's true of both the good ETs and the bad ETs. So fixing the climate is such a primitive idea. It's like, it could be done so easily. You don't have to sort of worry about all of these things. So the only thing I see that the good ETs talk about is the disclosure thing. That's what they talk to me about. Everything is dealing with my job here with the disclosure issue. That's what it's all about. And there's a ton of stuff, because this was actually addressed in the earlier question about what I plan to do afterwards, because I didn't fully go into that. After disclosure, if everything works the way we're thinking, there's going to be a huge re-educational effort that is going to go on, and then I'm going to be involved in university systems and helping to restructure educational, curricula. There's going to be a ton of stuff that needs to be done to put everything back together, to get everything sort of on a better frame. So I really can't check out until that part of it is done as well. So it's not just getting through the disclosure process and then everything's fine. It's going to be disclosure and then a huge re-educational effort where you got to answer questions. That's why FARSIGHT'Prime.com exists, is part of the reason that it exists, because we have to have a way to use all of our projects to tell people what's been going on over these years. We have some other projects that are in the works that you're going to be fascinated about that does use AI. I can give you a little bit of a hint of it, but the projects that we have are so many and so diverse, it's sometimes hard to sort of pull them all together. So one of the projects we're working on is using AI to help pull them all together with regard to using the actual words that are in all of our projects and having AI help us to synthesize and bring out the sort of the general themes that are coming out with respect to the evolution of the galaxy, the stuff that's been going on Earth, the stuff that's been going on in the solar system, and to have it being done partially with AI so that it can be, the claim can be said that it's not biased, so that the AI is doing it and it's systematically going through it, and this is the way it looks at all of the remote viewing stuff and sort of ties it and pieces it all together. Then we can add our own interpretations afterwards, but it gives sort of an AI interpretation of all of our projects put together, so you get a synthesis of sort of everything. Because this kind of a library, FARSIGHTPrime.com, it's never been seen on the planet Earth. It's a brand new type of thing. And at that level, that magnitude, it's just huge. How do you sort of synthesize everything and put it all together and bring it all together? And some of my book projects that are going to be coming out after that will be related to that. Anyway, that's stuff that's going on. Now, we've actually gone on quite a while, so we have good turnout here, too. It's after 8 o'clock, so we've been going well over an hour. Don't worry, I'm going to be getting to other questions as well. So next month, again, it'll probably be the second spotlight to occur, and we have them on Sundays usually. This time we didn't do it on Sunday because Sunday was the Super Bowl, and we didn't think many people would show up, so we put it off to Monday. But the second spotlight in next month will be March. That will be when we do the question and answer again. And then we'll do the same thing in April and May and June. So we're going to get to a lot of questions, and answering your questions is really a good thing. And I'll try to pick questions that I've not dealt with in previous spotlights. Anyway, you guys have been great. We've had a great turnout today. And love you all, and I thank you so much for being supporters. And for those of you who are subscribe to FARSIGHTPrime.com, just know that we wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for you guys. So we don't get any government funding, and we do not get any corporate funding. So we wouldn't be opposed to any of that, but we don't get any of that. And we sort of like our independence as well. So you guys are making, if we're going to make a huge contribution, which I think we are, that is, you guys are making that happen. By the way, I understand that something big on the disclosure realm is going to be happening this week. That's what Ross Coulthard of News Nation is saying. There's going to be some announcement we're waiting to hear from some congressional representative lady. We'll actually see what that's actually going. But the scuttlebutt is that the disclosure stuff is big. That's going to be happening on almost a weekly basis, and that you should expect this to be an accelerating ramp that we're on right now on the disclosure train. And so we're really pushing for this year for it all to happen. So we don't want it to delay like 2 or 3 years down the line, because the powers that be, they'd love it to be delayed, because what would happen is they then have total control over all of the social media. You see efforts already to anything that can't be controlled by the powers that be, they're trying to get control of. So it's a big issue. 2 or 3 years down the line, it'll be really hard. So now is the time that the disclosure process has to happen. So this is going to ramp up like really quickly. So every week, try to expect more stuff will be coming out. Anyway, remember what the ETs have also told us. We'll have a new update with our new board meeting that'll be coming out pretty soon. But the big thing is, remember what they said. The big ships are coming. Be patient. They didn't tell us the actual date that these things are happening, but are noticing on my Instagram feed that some people are really reporting very, very, very large ships. But sort of very obvious ships that stay in an area that people can go and drive to and see, that hasn't happened yet. So we're expecting that to happen at some point. But that's going to be, we're going to have to wait. They've actually told us that bigger ships are coming. They haven't told us exactly how they're coming. So we don't know if it's like they're going to stay there for like a whole day. We don't know. But they told us it's going to be it's going to be very obvious. All right. And then they also said the last message was communication. So based on one of the questions that were just asked, they want you to communicate. Obviously, they're trying to communicate, or otherwise they wouldn't show up with their ships, these so-called drones, which they don't like to use the word drones. But, obviously they're trying to communicate. And it's not just over New Jersey or the East Coast. It's worldwide. They're trying to communicate. So anything... Oh, one of the questions that I didn't get to was, is there any ways that I can try to communicate better? It doesn't matter what you try. Anything will work. They will realize it. They have the capability of noticing what people are doing. And if they sense anybody trying to communicate, they are elated. Let me guarantee you that. They are elated. And you don't worry about like being missed. They won't miss it. Do anything at all. Wave a banner, anything. They will notice it. And they will do whatever they can to, respond in some way, and so that you sort of get an idea that they did notice. They'll do something that, that sort of lets you know. Anyway, they don't want to rattle you, but at the same time, they want to know that when you make an effort to communicate, that's what they really are trying to get. They want you to try to talk back. All right, everybody. So it doesn't matter what you do, just do it. They'll respond. All right, so I will see you next week on Sunday for the next Spotlight. Now, next week will not be a Q&A, but it'll be something really important. So I will see you in 1 week. Be there or be square. Okay, see you soon, guys. And I mean guys generically, men and women, okay? All right.